Have you ever had the feeling that loving has become synonymous with getting lost? Of giving too much of yourself, only to realize that in the end, you were the only one with your hands outstretched? It's as if your heart still beats for someone who only knew how to hurt you, and then you learned. Not in a pretty way, not with flowers or soft goodbyes. You learned from silence, with absence, with the wound that no one saw, but that screamed inside until you shut it all up. Rumi wrote, "Don't hurt yourself with what you left behind. It was necessary for you to find yourself." But no one warned you that sometimes what you love deeply is also what destroys you the most. And now you don't give in anymore. Not because it turned to stone, but because he got tired of being a garden for those who only came to harvest. He got tired of being a shelter for those fleeing from their own storm. You learned that your soul is too sacred to be a hiding place for those who don't know how to love. There are people who don't come to love. They come to extract. They come to feed on your light, your hope, your surrender. And you, with an open heart, let it happen. But the cycle repeated itself. You gave yourself completely and came out in pieces. And all that was left was that echo. Why always me? Why does it always hurt? It's because you felt too much. I loved too much. I believed too much. Even when the signs screamed, "It's not love, it's attachment disguised as salvation." Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And you broke it. Once, twice, 1,000 times, until something inside you finally woke up. Now you no longer beg for crumbs. It no longer bends down to be seen. It no longer molds itself to fit absences. You no longer surrender to those who only come to hurt. Because she learned the difference between being chosen and being used, between presence and lack, between love and emotional distraction. You've discovered that your worth isn't how many times you can be broken. It's how many times you refuse to go back to the same place of pain. And no, that didn't make you cold, made you aware, made you whole. You feel it because the soul screams, because something inside you knows you deserve more. More healing silence and less draining noise. More real presence and less emotional ghosts. This is the silent cure that no one tells you about. The inner awakening that only happens when you stop looking for in others what can only be found within yourself. You feel it, don't you? That you can no longer romanticize what exhausts you. That we can no longer pretend that love is pain. That care is control. That presence is dependence. You feel that now. You only accept those who come completely. Who looks into your eyes and sees your soul, not just your needs. Who is not afraid of his silence. Who doesn't run away when you show your truth. Because in the end, loving is not about losing yourself in the other. It's finding yourself in the midst of chaos and yet choosing to remain light. But lightness requires reciprocity, requires healing. It requires soul. And perhaps that's why today you choose to withdraw, choose to protect yourself, choose to listen to what your intuition screams, even when your heart still whispers hope. You stopped giving in because you finally understood. Some people don't deserve access to your sacred. They just want to open doors, to invade, not to inhabit. And you are not an empty house. You are a temple. You are fire. You are a soul that has learned to say no more. But what if the pain that woke you up is also the same one that still holds you back? What if the heart is still trying to understand why love came in the form of a wound? That's what nobody talks about. Love, when misdirected, becomes a prison. And the soul, when it is not heard, screams. Screams in the silent nights. Screams in the burning memories. It screams when you try to follow, but something still pulls you back. So in this video, we're going to go through this uncomfortable truth together. Not to blame the other, but to free herself. Because understanding this pain is the first step to healing. And healing is the greatest act of self-love there is. Now tell me here in the comments, have you ever felt like you gave yourself to someone who only knew how to hurt you? If any part of this video spoke to your soul, write it down. Your comment may be a mirror of someone else's pain. And by sharing, you also begin to transform. Enjoy and leave your like. It's not just a button. It's a sign that this content matters, that it needs to reach more people like you. And if you feel like this journey is yours too, sign up. There is a lot that still needs to be said, and the soul never stops wanting to heal. Have you ever felt that the more you love, the more you lose yourself, as if the act of surrendering yourself ceases to be beautiful and becomes a constant, almost imperceptible, yet deeply painful, emptying? It's as if every piece you gave with your open heart is ripped back, stained, distorted, and made smaller, and you begin to wonder, is loving this way healing me or consuming me? It's just that no one taught you to love with limits. No one told you that giving too much of yourself can be dangerous, especially when you give yourself to someone who is not whole, who only knows how to receive, but has never learned to care. You thought that love was about giving yourself, but little by little he realized he was fading away. And do you know what's cruelest? It's when the other person only shows up when they need you, when it's bad, when you are needy, when you need to heal, using your light. But when you are the one in need, when you are the one bleeding, silence responds, absence screams, and yet you're still there, because he believes that true love is persistent, because you feel that if you give up now, everything you've given will have been in vain. But the silent truth, the one you avoid facing, is that love doesn't hurt. What hurts is insisting on being seen where there is emotional blindness. It's wanting to be a priority in a heart that doesn't even know what it carries inside. You didn't realize you were being hurt at first, because the pain came disguised as intermittent attention, of sweet gestures between long absences, of beautiful words that hid empty actions. It was the kind of presence that made you smile one moment and doubt yourself the next. And then you started to shut up. You stopped saying what hurt you, stopped asking why he changed, stopped asking. He started to get used to little, and he thought that was emotional maturity when in fact it was survival. That's where the invisible problem lies. You've adapted to the pain. You created justifications for the neglect. You told yourself he loved in his own way, that maybe you were exaggerating, that he just needed time. But deep down, you knew. I knew something was wrong. I knew I was giving too much to someone who didn't even know what to do with so much love. You started living in standby mode. I hoped he would get better. I hoped he realized what he had. I hoped he would change. But he didn't change. And the longer you waited, the more you lost yourself. He lost his peace, his essence, his intuition. And the saddest thing, he began to lose faith in love. The truth is, no one should have to erase themselves to keep someone close. But you did it. Maybe I'm still doing it. Because she's afraid of being alone. Because you think love is scarcity. Because you believe that if you walk away, you will regret it. But true regret is staying in a place where love has become constant pain. And no, you are not weak for feeling this way. You are human. You love deeply. And so he also feels deeply. But now it's time to understand that it's not love that's wrong. It's where you've placed it. You deserve a love that lasts. Let him listen. Who cares without you having to yell or beg for attention? You deserve a love that heals, that soothes, that respects. A love that recognizes the preciousness of your surrender and never turns it into a weapon. And maybe you're still trying to figure out how you got here. How could someone with so much light, with such beautiful intentions, end up so hurt? But this is the blind spot of many stories. The wounded soul attracts mirrors, and not every mirror reflects. Some distort, and they make you doubt your beauty, your intensity, your essence. Now that you've come this far, stop for a second. Take a deep breath. Feel everything this video is awakening in you. Because this pain that you carry in silence, it needs a name, and it will only begin to transform when you accept that you are not alone. If this touched you, if this part of the journey is yours too, right below, I gave too much of myself and lost my way. This sentence, written by you, could be the healing voice that another soul needs to read today. Maybe the problem was never the other person. Maybe the real conflict lives within you, in a silent space where your soul screams and almost no one hears. Maybe what makes you suffer so much isn't just the absence of the one you love, but the absence you created within yourself in your attempt to be accepted. You gave up your truth to fit into other people's expectations. You molded your essence to avoid disturbing others. You silenced your intuition to keep someone close. And little by little, you lost yourself. It's hard to see this, I know, because the mind clings to what's concrete, to the other person's actions, to the words that were missed, to the gestures that hurt. But what really hurts is the silent abandonment you committed against yourself. It's having stopped listening to yourself. It's having ignored every signal from your body that told you, this place is no longer safe. But you stayed. You persisted. And it wasn't because you didn't know better, it was because you still believed that love was about holding on. But love isn't resistance. Love is flow. It's reciprocity. It's complete presence. Rumi said, "You were created with wings, not to crawl after those who don't see you." And even knowing this, you still crawled. Not out of weakness, but out of faith. Because you believed in the other more than you believed in yourself. Because your soul wanted to be chosen. It wanted to be seen. It wanted, for the first time, not to have to beg for love. But you ended up begging. And it wasn't pretty. It was painful. It was exhausting. It was cruel to your own essence. The spiritual root of this pain isn't just in the relationship that ended, or the one that still holds you emotionally captive. It's in the repeated pattern of abandonment you've carried since long ago, perhaps since childhood. From that first moment you realized that, to be loved, you had to hide parts of yourself. You had to be nice, silent, strong, understanding, disguised, and you learned to adapt. You adapted so much that today you no longer even know what true love is, because love has always come mixed with pain, absence, or condition. But true love, spiritual love, the kind that begins within, doesn't demand anything. It doesn't hold you back. It doesn't demand that you diminish yourself to be accepted. The pain you feel today is a reflection of an ancient cycle, a cycle that repeats itself whenever you try to heal others with the love they never gave you. Because deep down, your soul wants to prove that it can be loved even if it's hurt, even if it's ignored, even if it's not a priority. And therein lies the trap. You think that giving yourself will heal the other person, that loving more will transform the relationship, that giving your all will make the other person see. But no one sees what they don't want to see. No one feels what they're not willing to feel. No one values what they've never learned to care for. And the more you insist on giving your most sacred possessions to someone who doesn't know how to receive, the more you exhaust yourself, the more you hurt yourself, the more you disconnect from your own essence. That's why it hurts so much. It's not just because the person left. It's because, in the process, you left too. You left yourself. And now, even with the other person far away, that emptiness still exists. That hole you try to fill with memories, with justifications, with hope, but none of it heals. Because the wound isn't in the other person, it's in you. In the part of you that believes you need to be perfect to be loved, that you need to fix everything, that you need to give yourself beyond your limits, that you need to save the other person, even when no one will save you. This is the most silent pain, that of a soul exhausted trying to be what others need, forgetting who they are. And until you look at this honestly, you'll continue to engage with the same pain, just with different faces. You'll continue to wait for someone outside to validate you, when the only validation that heals is that which comes from within. That's when you decide to come back to yourself. That's when you start listening to your intuition again. That's when you understand that it's not your obligation to carry anyone on your shoulders, especially those who only show up to drag you down. Rumi said, "Do not seek outside what can only be healed within." And this is the spiritual key you need now. Healing is not in the return of the other, nor in the message that never arrived, nor in the reunion you still await. Healing is in the choice to return to who you were before you bent to fit. It's in rebuilding the bridge to your soul. It's in silencing the outside world to finally hear the voice that comes from within. If this truth has touched you, if you felt that this part is yours, write here in the comments, "I lost myself trying to be accepted." This phrase could be the seed of your reunion, and also the silent embrace that another soul needs to find here. What no one told you is that true love doesn't tear you apart. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't leave you feeling like you're always wrong, always lacking, always owing something. Those who truly love you don't confuse you. They don't disappear when you need them most. They don't show up only when you're hurt, only to disappear when you finally want to be seen. Those who truly love heal you. And healing doesn't mean perfection. Healing is presence. It's care. It's emotional responsibility. It's the delicacy of knowing that touching another requires respect, especially when that other has a sensitive soul, like yours. But you grew accustomed to the opposite. You learned, through pain, that loving meant enduring, that surrendering was synonymous with losing control, that feeling too much was a source of shame, And without realizing it, you began to resist your own sensitivity. You began to believe you were too intense, too needy, too deep. Not because it was true, but because they said so. They said so every time you showed your feelings, every time you asked for presence, every time you wanted to be welcomed instead of tolerated. The soul knows when it's being pushed into a corner. It feels it. It notices the small absences, the cold words, the looks that no longer see you. And yet, you stayed, because you thought love was about holding on. But holding on isn't loving. Loving is surrendering yourself in the right place. And the greatest spiritual key lies precisely there. The mistake isn't in feeling deeply. The mistake is in offering yourself as a home to someone who only wants to spend the night. It's in building bridges where the other only builds walls. It's in insisting on someone who only shows up when they want something, but never stays when you need everything. Rumi said that love is the bridge between you and everything. And this bridge cannot be made of rotten wood. It cannot be built with fear, scarcity, or desperation to be accepted. It must be built with awareness, with truth, with mutual surrender. It's not the intensity of your love that destroys you. It's the place where you place that love. Because when you plant light in dry ground, what grows is empty. And the cruelest thing is that you begin to doubt your own light. You begin to think the problem is within you, when in fact the problem has always been where you tried to flourish. There's a silent freedom that only comes when you stop begging, when you understand that love isn't asked for. Love is felt. And if it's not felt, it's not love. Maybe attachment, maybe neediness, maybe fear of being alone, but not love. Because love, even when it hurts, doesn't wound. It builds, even in pauses. It cares, even in silence. It endures, even in storms. True love doesn't come to teach you to endure pain. It comes to teach you to recognize yourself, to see yourself, to remember who you were before you believed you needed to be less to be loved. When you stop begging for love, you start listening to your soul. You begin to realize how many times you've kept quiet to keep someone, how many times you've betrayed yourself to avoid being abandoned, how many times you've said okay when you were imploding inside. The soul remembers every time you diminished yourself, and it doesn't blame you for it. It understands. It knows you were just trying to be seen, trying to be chosen. But there comes a time when even the soul tires, and that's when healing begins. Healing begins when you accept that you don't need to be accepted by those who don't recognize you, that you don't need to prove your worth to those who are blind to themselves, that you don't need to hold the world together to avoid losing someone who doesn't even hold your hand. Healing begins when you understand that surrendering yourself isn't making a mistake. Making a mistake is giving yourself where there's no space, where there's no reciprocity, where your presence is treated as excess, and it may have taken you a long time to get here. You may have cried entire nights trying to understand where you lost yourself. But if you've made it this far, something inside you has already awakened. You no longer want crumbs. You're no longer content with emotional visits. You no longer romanticize absences. Because now you know, love that bleeds you is not love. It's poorly healed attachment. It's a repetition of an old void you tried to fill with the wrong person. And there's nothing wrong with having loved. Nothing wrong with having surrendered. The mistake lies in continuing in a cycle that distances you from yourself. The soul, as it begins to heal, becomes quieter, more selective, more steadfast. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stop offering yourself to those who lack the depth to welcome you. And in this silence, everything begins to make sense. The freedom to no longer beg turns into peace. And this peace is the true presence of self-love. If this truth touched you, if it made sense at this point in your journey, write here in the comments. I stopped begging and started listening to myself. Maybe these words alone are the beginning of your liberation, and the liberation of anyone else who passes by here and recognizes themselves in you. Maybe you've experienced exactly this. Maybe it was in that relationship that seemed promising, where at first everything was presence, sweet words, gestures full of intention. He told you you were different, that he'd never met anyone like you, that you'd finally found peace, and you believed him, because your soul wanted to believe, because there was a silent hope within you that, this time it would be different, that finally someone would see beyond the surface. So, you surrendered, completely, with all your layers, with all your pain still healing, with all the traumas that had never been welcomed by anyone. You surrendered your soul in the form of care, of patience, of listening, of real presence. You held his pain without blinking. When he fell, you ran. When he disappeared, you waited. When he screamed, you fell silent, all to maintain the connection, all to avoid losing him again, all to avoid repeating that old script of abandonment that still haunts you. And he realized it. Not consciously, perhaps, but he felt you were always there, that no matter what he did or didn't do, you would be waiting. He knew all he had to do was return with an apology, a rehearsed word, a small gesture, and you would reopen the doors. And you blamed yourself, because you knew you deserved more, but you couldn't break away. You thought love was persistence. You thought giving up was failure. You thought there was still something to be saved. But little by little, the light you shone for him began to blind you. You no longer knew who you were. You no longer felt the same inner strength that once drove you. You began to walk in the dark. You began to live in a state of waiting. Waiting for a genuine gesture, for a constant presence, for a deep conversation that never came. And he kept coming and going as he pleased. And you continued to be sunshine for someone who only knew how to bring storms. Until one day you stopped. Not because you felt nothing anymore, but because you felt too much. Because your body could no longer bear the weight of being strong all the time. Because your soul could no longer bear being a backdrop in the story of someone who never put you at the center. Because your light, tired, threatened to fade. It was then that something inside you awakened. An ancient memory of the woman you were before you faded. A soft yet firm voice telling you that you weren't made to beg for love. That your soul wasn't born to live on emotional crumbs. That your intensity wasn't excessive. It was your sacred language. And you understood that this wasn't about turning to stone. It was about becoming a temple. About being a place too sacred to allow temporary entrances. About being a space of light, but now with doors. Doors that don't open to just anyone. Doors that demand respect, truth, depth. You became a temple because you learned to protect what's most valuable within you. Your ability to feel deeply, to love with presence, to heal with your gaze. Now you don't surrender as you once did. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Not out of trauma, but out of respect. Not out of blockage, but out of wisdom. You still love, but you love differently. You love with roots. You love with filters. You love with pause. You love with truth. You know that whoever wants to stay will stay without you having to chase them. That whoever is real will make a point of caring for your soul, not just your body. That whoever has depth will understand that loving you is no easy task, but it is the most transformative thing that can happen. And this new way of loving doesn't erase the pain of the past. On the contrary, it honors. It honors every night you cried alone, every time you said it's okay when you weren't okay, every attempt you made to hold on to someone who didn't know how to stay, every little hope that slowly died. All of this shaped you. All of this made you a temple. Today, when someone approaches, you feel it with the first touch, the first glance, the first absence. Your soul already knows, because now it's awake. And this awareness didn't come easily. It came through pain, through repetition, through misdirected surrender. But above all, it came through the decision to no longer surrender to those who only come to hurt. Maybe now you look back and still feel something. It's normal. The soul has memories. But that doesn't mean you want to go back. It just means you've learned, that you've integrated, that you've transformed that pain into wisdom. And that's true healing. When the memory still exists but no longer holds you back. When the name still echoes but no longer hurts. When the feeling still vibrates but you're no longer lost to it. If you've experienced something similar, if this example reminded you of something you still keep to yourself, write it here in the comments. I became a temple, not a shelter. This phrase could be the beginning of a new identity, yours. And it could also be the reflection another soul needed to remember that it is still sacred. You are not the pain they made you feel. You are not the abandonment you suffered, nor the absence you learned to accept in silence. You are not the emptiness you carried trying to be enough for someone who didn't even know the value of what they held in their hands. You are not the nights you cried in secret, nor the smiles you forced to pretend everything was okay. You are the one who survived all of this, and you survived with your soul still beating, even though tired, with your heart still loving, even after being rejected so many times. You are the one who stood up when everything inside you begged you to lie down and give up. And now, at this very moment, you have a choice. Perhaps the first real choice you've made after so long living on autopilot. You can choose who enters. You can choose who stays. You can choose who has access to the most sacred part of you, your presence, your energy, your soul. Because now, after so much, you understand that not everyone is ready to touch your essence. Not everyone deserves to hear your silences. Not everyone knows how to deal with someone who feels as deeply as you. Rumi said, "Close some doors, not out of pride, but because they no longer lead anywhere." And that's exactly it. There are doors you've left open for too long. Emotional doors, spiritual doors, doors that should have been closed at the first sign of neglect, but that you kept wide open out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear that no one would ever show up again. And deep down, that fear wasn't about the other person. It was about the idea you created that love would only come if you remained available, accessible, always ready to welcome even those who didn't know how to stay. But now something has changed. Now you're no longer afraid of silence. You no longer fear your own company. You no longer rush to fill voids with shallow presences. You've learned that solitude isn't absence, but space. A space where your soul can breathe, where your emotions can align, where your intuition can finally be heard. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped begging. You've stopped diminishing yourself to be loved. Because you've realized that the love you deserve doesn't require effort. It simply flows. You're not the same anymore, and you don't have to be. The pain you've endured has transformed you. It has refined you. It has broken you so precisely that now your cracks have become portals. Portals through which light enters. Portals through which wisdom blossoms. Portals that remind you that, even broken, you are still whole. That, even wounded, you still pulse with truth. That, even tired, you still choose to rise, not to please anyone but for yourself. And this is where spiritual empowerment lies. Not in pretending everything is fine, but in accepting every part of yourself with compassion. Not in following canned self-love formulas, but in building a new relationship with your own soul. A relationship where you no longer need to abandon yourself to be loved. Where you can say no without guilt. Where you can say yes with awareness. Where you can pause, breathe, step back, choose. Without fear, without justification, without guilt. Because now you know that your energy is precious, that your time is sacred, that your attention is golden, and that anyone who wants to be a part of your life needs to understand this, needs to respect this, needs to honor this. You no longer accept being a background in anyone's life, no longer accept lukewarm relationships, partial presence, or conditional love. You want depth. You want truth. You want someone who looks at you and sees beyond the physical. Someone who understands your soul, even when you say nothing. Someone who stays not because they have to, but because they choose to, every day. And yes, this kind of love exists, but it only arrives when you become that space, when you become the temple that doesn't open its doors to any inattentive presence, when you understand that being alone isn't a punishment, it's an invitation to go back within, to heal with patience, to rediscover yourself with ease, to love yourself so deeply that no one else can love you halfway without it hurting you. And perhaps now you're at that exact point, the turning point, the point where you no longer need external proof, the point where you know what you deserve and you're no longer in a rush, because your soul is at peace, and this peace is the filter that separates the real from the fleeting, the true from the convenient, the profound from the shallow, the healing of repetition. If you felt that this moment was yours, if something inside you was awakened by this truth, write here in the comments, "I closed the right door." This phrase can be the echo of liberation, and also a call for other souls to recognize that freedom begins with a single choice. If you've made it this far, it's because something within you is in the process of awakening. Maybe it was a word, a silence between sentences, or a memory that this video brought to the surface. The fact is, you stayed, you endured, and that says a lot about your soul. A soul that grew tired of being a shelter for those who bring only destruction, and now chooses to be a temple of light, a temple of healing, a temple of truth. So, if this message spoke to you, if it touched a part of your story, your pain, or your hope, subscribe to the channel. Because the journey we began together in this video is just the beginning. There's so much more to be said, felt, and healed. and I want to accompany you on this journey back to yourself. And if you felt this way, leave a like, not out of obligation, but as a sign that this content reached its destination. And now watch the next video that appears on the screen, because it is the continuation of this process. Because your healing doesn't end here, it's only just beginning.